The Ferrari was already halfway toward the garage exit when Elena Ramirez stepped directly in front of it. The driver hit the brake. A bright, red Ferrari SF90 stopped less than 6 feet from her steel-toed boots, its engine settling into an expensive mechanical purr that echoed through the immaculate service bay. Every conversation inside Bellini Performance, Miami died. Elena stood beneath fluorescent lights, wearing navy work pants, a gray mechanic's shirt darkened with sweat between her shoulders, and black nitrile gloves streaked with grease. A loose strand of dark hair had escaped the messy bun at the back of her head. At 30, she had learned that customers at places like Bellini Performance rarely expected the fuller-figured woman carrying the torque wrench to be the person responsible for their $600,000 cars. Usually, she ignored the looks. Today, ignoring people was becoming difficult. Move. The command came from Marco Vale, one of the 3 men waiting beside the Ferrari. Elena didn't. Marco was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. He had arrived 20 minutes earlier with 2 black SUVs and the particular kind of confidence that made everyone in the garage suddenly discover urgent reasons to look elsewhere. Elena glanced through the windshield. Turn it off. The driver stared at her. Behind Elena, her service manager made a strangled sound. Elena. She didn't turn. Turn it off. The Ferrari's engine stopped. Silence rushed into the bay. Marco walked toward her slowly. You were told the vehicle was being collected, and I said it isn't ready. It was brought in for routine service. I know. Which was completed. No, it wasn't. A younger technician standing near a Lamborghini lowered his head, trying unsuccessfully to hide a smile. Marco noticed. Nobody smiled anymore. Elena, her manager, Richard Bellini, said, hurrying across the polished concrete floor. Office, now. She finally looked at him. Richard's face was pallor. Not angry. Afraid. That changed something. Elena looked again at the 3 men. Then at the black SUVs visible outside. Then at the Ferrari. She had worked around wealthy people long enough to recognize influence. Wealthy customers complained. Powerful customers didn't need to. People complained for them. Richard, she said quietly. I can't release this car. You absolutely can. No. Elena, something's wrong with it. Marco gave a humorless laugh. You've had it for 9 hours, 8 hours and 43 minutes, and suddenly something is wrong? No. Something was wrong when it arrived. I just didn't know what I was hearing. Marco looked toward Richard. This is the mechanic you assigned? Elena saw Richard's embarrassment before he answered. One of our mechanics. The younger technician laughed again, this time under his breath. Maybe she wants another test drive, he muttered. A couple of men nearby smiled. Elena felt the familiar heat climb her neck. She knew the joke. The chubby mechanic wanted to drive the Ferrari. Of course. She pulled off one glove. Put it back on the lift. Marco stepped closer. No. Elena met his eyes. Then tow it. His expression changed. Richard whispered, Jesus Christ. Marco leaned slightly toward her. Do you know whose car this is? No. You should. Does knowing make the fuel pressure normal? That stopped him. Not because he understood, because someone behind him did. A man's voice came from the glass-walled customer lounge overlooking the service floor. What did you say? Elena looked up. She had noticed him earlier without knowing who he was. He had been sitting alone in the lounge while the others handled everything around him. Dark charcoal suit, white shirt without a tie, black hair combed neatly back. Olive complexion, late 30s perhaps. No visible impatience. He hadn't checked his phone once. Everyone else checked him. That should have told her enough. He descended the metal staircase. Nobody spoke. Even Richard moved aside. The man stopped in front of Elena. He wasn't enormous. He didn't need to be. There was something more unsettling about the stillness in his face. Fuel pressure, he said. Elena nodded. What about it? It isn't behaving correctly. The diagnostic report is clean. I know. Then why are you stopping my car? There it was. My car. Elena looked at Richard. Richard closed his eyes briefly. She looked back at the stranger. Because diagnostic computers tell you what sensors report. They don't tell you whether somebody designed the problem to stay inside acceptable parameters. Something flickered behind his eyes. Designed? I didn't say I was sure. You just stood in front of a moving Ferrari. I'm reasonably sure. Marco scoffed. The man ignored him. Show me. 10 minutes later, the Ferrari was 6 feet in the air. Elena stood beneath it with a flashlight. Luca Moretti stood beside her. She knew his name now. Richard had whispered it while the lift rose. Luca Moretti. Even Elena knew that name. Moretti Coastal Holdings owned hotels, warehouses, commercial property, freight companies, and enough of Miami's waterfront to appear regularly in newspapers. There were other stories too, the kind never printed beside photographs of ribbon cuttings. Federal investigations that went nowhere. Competitors who abruptly sold companies. Politicians photographed at Moretti charity events. People who lowered their voices before saying his name. Elena had expected learning his identity to make her nervous. It did. It simply didn't make the Ferrari safer. She directed the flashlight toward the underside. Here. Luca bent slightly. I see a fuel line. You see what you're supposed to see. She reached carefully around a heat shield. Don't touch anything, Marco warned. Elena looked at him. I'm a mechanics. Luca said nothing. She continued. This fitting isn't factory. Marco folded his arms. The car has aftermarket modifications. Not here. How can you tell? Elena pointed. Tool marks. Luca moved closer. Their shoulders almost touched. She became unexpectedly aware of his cologne beneath the smell of oil and warm metal. Elena shifted half a step away. See that? A tiny series of marks interrupted the otherwise perfect metal. Luca's expression remained unreadable. Someone removed it and replaced it. With what? I don't know yet, Marco said. Then we're done. No, Elena said. Marco's jaw tightened. Luca looked at her. What made you notice? The sound. What sound? A hesitation. Marco laughed. A hesitation. Elena ignored him. When the technician brought it into the bay this morning, the idle dipped for less than a second. Maybe 40 RPM. Then it corrected. You heard 40 RPM? I heard the correction. Luca stared at her. She continued. I checked the computer. Nothing. Pressure looked normal. Injectors looked normal. Pumps looked normal. So why keep looking? Because machines don't lie. Marco smirked. People do? All the time. Luca's gaze remained on her face. For the first time, something almost resembling amusement touched his expression. Elena pointed again. I ran it under controlled load. At higher demand, pressure fluctuated. How much? Not enough to trigger the ECU. And at highway speed? Elena hesitated. That's what worries me. The amusement disappeared. She lowered the flashlight. If this behaves the way I think it does, you could drive around Miami all afternoon and never notice anything. But sustained speed, high fuel demand, enough heat. What happens? I don't know until I remove it. Luca's voice became quieter. Guess. Elena looked directly at him. You lose fuel delivery at exactly the moment you're least able to safely stop. Nobody laughed now. Luca looked beneath the Ferrari again. How long? Give me an hour. You have 30 minutes. No. Marco stared at her, as if she had slapped someone. Luca slowly turned. Elena gestured toward the car. You want the answer or a fast answer? A long silence. Then Luca said, take the hour. It took 52 minutes. When Elena finally emerged from beneath the Ferrari, everyone was waiting. She placed a small modified assembly onto a stainless steel workbench. Luca stood opposite her. What am I looking at? A very expensive accident. She explained the modification carefully. The component had been altered so subtly that normal inspection would likely classify it as wear or an aftermarket irregularity. Under ordinary city driving, nothing dramatic would happen. Under sustained high-speed demand, however, the system could become dangerously unstable. The frightening part wasn't the damage. It was the precision. Someone understood the Ferrari. Someone understood diagnostics. Someone understood exactly how to create a failure that might later look mechanical. Luca stared at the component. Could this happen accidentally? No. How certain are you? Elena considered lying. Looking at the men around Luca convinced her not to. 98%. What gives you the other two? I wasn't there when somebody changed it. Luca looked toward Marco. One glance. That was all. Marco immediately took out his phone and walked away. Elena watched him. What happens now? Luca returned his attention to her. You go home. Great. And you don't discuss this. Her eyebrows rose. I wasn't planning a podcast. His expression barely moved. Ms. Ramirez. The fact that he knew her name unsettled her more than anything else had. Yes? You prevented me from driving that car. Yes. Why? Elena frowned. Because it wasn't safe. You didn't know me. Still don't. My men frightened your employer. That was obvious. You knew stopping the car might cost you your job. Elena glanced toward Richard. Richard suddenly found the floor interesting. Yeah, yet you did it. She looked back at Luca. What was I supposed to do? Let you drive away because your suit scared everybody? Something changed in his eyes. Not warmth. Interest. Luca Moretti was accustomed to people wanting things from him. Money. Access. Approval. Fear could be useful because fear was predictable. Elena Ramirez didn't seem interested in any of those things. She only seemed irritated that nobody had listened. He picked up the altered component. Thank you. Elena blinked. She hadn't expected that. You're welcome. He walked away. Marco followed. At the garage entrance, Luca stopped. He looked back at her. Don't drive home alone tonight. Elena frowned. Why? Because if someone did this deliberately, you just became the person who ruined their plan. Then he disappeared into the sunlight. For several seconds, Elena stood motionless. Richard approached her. You are either the bravest mechanic I've ever hired. She looked at him. Or the dumbest. Am I fired? Richard stared toward the disappearing SUVs. I genuinely don't know anymore. 3 hours later, Elena learned Luca had not been exaggerating. She finished her shift after sunset. Her old silver Honda Civic sat behind the garage beside the employee entrance. The driver's side paint was fading. The air conditioner worked whenever it felt emotionally prepared. Elena loved it. She tossed her backpack onto the passenger seat and started the engine. A black SUV started behind her. She froze. Another sat near the street. Elena got out. The SUV window lowered. Marco was driving. You've got to be kidding me. Get back in your car. Are you following me? Escorting. I didn't ask for an escort. Mr. Moretti did. Tell Mr. Moretti I said no. Marco looked almost entertained. You can tell him yourself. He raised his window. Elena stood in the parking lot. Furious. Then she noticed the white sedan across the street. Its lights were off. A man sat behind the wheel. Watching. Elena's irritation cooled. The sedan pulled away. Marco's SUV followed it. The second black SUV remained. For the first time that evening, Elena understood that the problem beneath Luca's Ferrari had not stayed beneath Luca's Ferrari. It had followed her home. The next morning, Luca Moretti returned to Bellini Performance. Not with the Ferrari. With 6 vehicles. Richard nearly fainted. Elena walked into the service bay carrying coffee and stopped. 2 Range Rovers. A Mercedes sedan. A Cadillac Escalade. A black BMW. And another Ferrari. What is this? Luca stood beside the first Range Rover. Work. I already have work. I spoke with Bellini. Elena looked at Richard. Richard gave her the expression of a man who had been offered enough money to temporarily forget loyalty. She looked back at Luca. No. Luca seemed genuinely surprised. No? You don't get to arrive with half a dealership and reorganize my day. I need these inspected. Schedule an appointment. Marco coughed into his fist. Luca glanced at him. Marco became extremely interested in a tire. Luca looked back at Elena. You found something my security team missed. Your security team isn't made of mechanics. They employ mechanics, apparently not good ones. That earned her the smallest hint of a smile. These vehicles are used regularly by people close to me. Then whoever normally services them should inspect them. They already did. Elena understood. And? They found nothing. She looked at the vehicles again. That interested her despite herself. Luca saw it. You're curious. No. You're staring. Mechanics stare at cars. Inspect them. Elena took a sip of coffee. My rate just doubled. Fine. She narrowed her eyes. You agreed too quickly. Triple it. That isn't how negotiating works. It is when I want the answer more than I want the money. Elena hated that response. Mostly because she liked it. By noon, she had found nothing. By 2, she had found something. Not sabotage. A pattern. 3 vehicles showed signs that small components had recently been removed and replaced despite no corresponding maintenance entries. The work itself was nearly invisible. The missing paperwork was not. Elena brought Luca into the bay. Who handles your fleet records? A company we control. That's not an answer. Moretti Mobility Services. Who has access? Several people. Make the list shorter. His eyes sharpened. What did you find? Somebody touched 3 of these cars. Sabotage? I don't know. Then what do you know? That whoever did it didn't want the work recorded. Luca moved closer to the vehicles. Elena opened service histories on her tablet. See these mileage intervals? These cars were inspected here, here, and here. Yes. Except physical wear says someone opened components between those dates. You can tell that from where? Bolts, remember. Luca looked at her. She shrugged. Metal doesn't heal. Every tool leaves something. He studied her for several seconds. What do you need? Access to the original maintenance records. You'll have them. And whoever worked on these vehicles. You'll have names. And stop sending men outside my apartment. No. Elena stared at him. Excuse me? No. You don't own me. I didn't say I did. You're having people follow me. Protect you. I didn't ask. No. Then it isn't protection. The garage seemed suddenly quieter. Luca's face changed. Not anger. Something more thoughtful. What would you call it? Control. He said nothing. Elena closed the tablet. If you want me to help you, that's the first rule. You're giving me rules? Yes. Marco looked away, perhaps to conceal his reaction. Luca's gaze stayed on Elena. What rule? No one follows me without telling me. No one enters my apartment. No one talks to my family. And if there's danger that involves me, you tell me what it is, instead of deciding what I can handle. That may not always be possible. Then neither is me helping you. She handed him the tablet. Luca didn't take it immediately. He had negotiated with union leaders, developers, politicians, and men who commanded organizations capable of shutting down entire sections of the port. None of them had ever negotiated while holding a half-eaten turkey sandwich. He took the tablet. Agreed. Marco looked at him. Luca ignored him. That afternoon became the first of many. Elena began working through Luca's vehicles, then through records, then through photographs of damaged components from vehicles she never physically saw. She discovered that Luca was almost impossible to impress twice. The first time she caught something, he was surprised. The second time, he expected excellence. Strangely, Elena preferred that. He stopped praising her. He started asking what she thought. That distinction mattered. 3 nights later, she was sitting on the garage floor beside a disassembled fuel module when Luca appeared carrying 2 coffees. The garage had closed an hour earlier. You're still here. So are you. This is my investigation. This is my workplace. He held out a cup. 2 creams. No sugar. Elena stared at it. How do you know that? You've ordered the same coffee every morning. You noticed? Luca seemed confused by the question. Yes. She accepted it. He sat on a rolling mechanic's stool opposite her. The image was absurd. A feared Miami power broker in a tailored suit sitting beneath a Porsche calendar, while Elena Ramirez wiped grease from her wrist. She smiled. What? Nothing. You're smiling. You look ridiculous. Luca looked down at himself. I'm sitting. In a garage. I've been in garages. Not like this. How would you know? Because you haven't touched anything since you got here. He looked around. Everything is dirty. Elena laughed. Actually laughed. Luca watched her. For one strange second, neither of them said anything. Then Elena noticed the way he was looking at her and focused immediately on the component between them. There's something else. The softness vanished. What? These modifications aren't identical. That matters? A lot. She showed him 2 photographs. The Ferrari modification required expertise. Whoever did it understood the vehicle. But this one? She pointed toward another component. Different objective. Somebody removed it, inspected something, and put it back. What? I don't know. Tracking device? No? Nothing added. Luca frowned. Elena rotated the photograph. Maybe they weren't trying to damage the cars. What else would they want? She looked at him. Information. That single word changed the investigation. Luca gave Elena temporary access to Moretti Mobility's maintenance database the following morning. She spent 2 days comparing service intervals, VIN histories, replacement orders, vendor invoices, and vehicle assignments. On the 3rd day, she found the first real connection. A supplier named Atlas Fleet Systems. They're everywhere, she told Luca. They were sitting inside his office on the 32nd floor of Moretti Coastal Holdings, overlooking Biscayne Bay. Elena felt painfully out of place. Everyone outside wore expensive clothing. She wore clean jeans and a black blouse because Luca had asked her, technically, that he needed her at the office. Atlas supplies parts to hundreds of companies, Luca said. Not like this. She turned her laptop toward him. Every vehicle showing unexplained service marks received at least one component through Atlas. Luca studied the screen. Coincidence? Maybe. You don't believe that? No. He leaned back. Atlas is bidding for a fleet replacement contract. Elena stopped. What fleet? Oh. How many vehicles? 187. She stared at him. When? Next month. Something clicked. Not enough for an answer. Enough for fear. Don't sign it. I wasn't planning to until we understand this. Good. You sound relieved. I don't want to inspect 187 cars because you ignored me. Again, that faint, almost smile. Elena was beginning to recognize it. The smile. He gave only her. The discovery also changed Luca's behavior. He found reasons to visit the garage. Sometimes legitimate ones. Sometimes increasingly ridiculous ones. A vibration in a Range Rover that Elena could not reproduce. A warning light that had already disappeared. A tire pressure question Marco could have answered. Once, Luca brought the Ferrari back because the steering felt different. Elena drove it around the block. It felt perfect. She returned, parked, and looked at him. There's nothing wrong with your steering. I thought there was. You were wrong. That happens occasionally. I'm documenting this moment. He leaned against the Ferrari. Dinner. Elena blinked. What? You haven't eaten. That sounded less like concern and more like an order. Luca paused, then corrected himself. Would you have dinner with me? The difference surprised both of them. Elena looked at him. Because you need to discuss the investigation? Yes. Only that? A beat. No. Her pulse changed. Luca didn't look away. Elena should have said no. Instead, she said, somewhere normal. His eyebrows lifted. Define normal. No private dining room. No restaurant where the chef knows your birthday. No place where water costs $20. 20 minutes later, Luca Moretti was sitting across from Elena in a Cuban restaurant where plastic menus were laminated and nobody cared who he was. He looked at the sandwich in front of him. What is this? Elena started. You live in Miami. Yes. And you've never had a media noche? No. Your criminal empire needs better priorities. Luca looked up. Elena froze. He stared at her for 2 seconds, then laughed. It was the first time she heard it. Not the restrained breath of amusement he gave in the garage. A real laugh. Quiet. Surprised. Almost rusty. Elena smiled despite herself. For the next hour, they talked about everything except sabotage. Elena told him about her father, Raphael, who had owned a tiny repair shop in Hialeah and taught her to diagnose engines by listening before plugging in a scanner. He used to shut off the radio whenever a customer drove in, she said. He'd say the car was already telling you what hurt. Is that where you learned? Mostly. Where is he now? Retired. Supposedly. Supposedly? He still repairs every neighbor's car for free. Luca nodded. And your mother? Died 8 years ago. His face softened slightly. I'm sorry. Elena looked at him. He didn't offer a story about himself. She didn't ask. Yet. Their relationship changed in increments so small Elena sometimes noticed only afterward. Luca began calling her directly, instead of sending Marco. Elena began answering. He stopped assigning security to her without permission. Instead, he texted, Do you want someone outside tonight? Usually Elena replied, No. Once, after seeing the same white sedan near her apartment twice, she wrote, Yes. Luca's response arrived instantly. Already nearby. They won't approach unless you ask. Elena stared at those words, longer than she wanted to admit. He was learning. So was she. The midpoint arrived on a rainy Thursday night. Elena had spent 6 hours reviewing photographs from a damaged Moretti security vehicle when she noticed something she had seen before. A specific wear pattern on a mounting bracket. She pulled the Ferrari photographs. Then Atlas Fleet's proposed replacement specifications. Then maintenance records. Her stomach tightened. She called Luca. Where are you? A meeting. Leave. Silence. Elena. Luca. Leave the meeting. He heard something in her voice. Where are you? Garage. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He arrived in 11. Elena had papers spread across the workbench. Luca walked in with Marco. "What happened? We've been looking at this wrong." She pointed toward the Ferrari photographs. The Ferrari wasn't the real attack. Marco frowned. It could have killed him. Maybe. But whoever did this couldn't guarantee when the failure happened. That's terrible planning if killing Luca was the only objective. Luca's eyes narrowed. "Continue. What happened after we found it?" "You inspected the fleet." "Yes." "Then what?" "We discovered unexplained maintenance." "And?" "Atlas." Elena nodded. "What did your security division recommend after discovering potentially compromised vehicles?" Marco answered slowly. "Replacing them." "With whose vehicles?" "Silence." Elena turned the Atlas proposal around. "Atlas Fleet Systems." Luca understood first. The Ferrari was meant to poison the fleet. Yes. Not poison mechanically. Poison trust. One frightening failure would make Luca distrust every vehicle currently in service. His own security department would recommend replacement. Atlas would conveniently provide the solution. And with the new vehicles would come maintenance access, software access, service scheduling, replacement components, telematics, location histories, and movement patterns. Not one attempt on Luca's life. A permanent window into his organization. Luca looked at Marco, who recommended Atlas. Marco's expression changed. Victor Hale. Luca became completely still. Elena had met Victor Once, Chief Operating Officer of Moretti Mobility. 61. Elegant. Polite. A man Luca had apparently trusted for 17 years. "Why?" Elena asked. Luca looked toward the rain beyond the garage door. "Because Atlas isn't just a supplier." He called someone. Within 20 minutes, Luca's people discovered what years of ordinary audits had missed. Atlas Fleet Systems was controlled through layered holding companies. At the end of them was a private investment group connected to Victor Hale's son. The motive unfolded slowly. Victor had helped build Moretti Mobility from almost nothing. But Luca had recently begun separating legitimate companies from older criminal networks, cutting men like Victor away from the influence that had made them powerful. Victor saw Luca's reforms not as progress, as betrayal. He intended to make Luca appear incapable of protecting his own organization, compromise Moretti's logistics contracts, manipulate vehicle data, and ultimately force the board of several legitimate companies to remove Luca from operational control. If Luca died during the process, that was acceptable, but death wasn't necessary. Humiliation was. Replacement was. Elena looked at Luca after everyone else left the garage. He stood alone beside the Ferrari. "You trusted him." "Yes. I'm sorry. Don't be. You're allowed to be hurt. I don't have the luxury." Elena stepped closer. "That sounds lonely." His eyes lifted to hers. For once, Luca had no immediate answer. Rain hammered the metal roof. "You think I'm lonely? I think everyone around you is either afraid of you or wants something. And you? I want you to stop bringing perfectly functional cars into my garage." He smiled faintly. Then it disappeared. "Elena." She waited. "You should leave Miami." Her expression hardened. "What?" "Until this is finished." "No." "Hale knows who discovered the modifications." "So?" "So you are now a liability to him. And your solution is deciding where I live. My solution is keeping you alive." There it is again. "Elena." "Control." His jaw tightened. "This is different. It always is when you're the one controlling it. You don't understand what these people are capable of." "Then explain it." "I can't explain everything." "Then you don't get to make everything my decision." His voice sharpened. "I am trying to protect you, and I'm trying to help you. I don't need you risking your life." The words landed badly. Elena went quiet. Luca realized it immediately. "You needed me when your Ferrari was on the lift." "Elena. You needed me when your experts missed the service patterns. I still need..." "No, you need my skill. But the second my opinion becomes inconvenient, suddenly I'm somebody you put somewhere safe. That isn't what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Luca looked at her. For the first time since she had known him, the controlled mafia boss seemed unable to find the right words. Elena picked up her bag. "I'll finish the technical report tomorrow." "Elena." She stopped. He almost reached for her arm. Almost. Then his hand dropped. That restraint hurt more than if he had touched her. "I don't want something happening to you because of me," he said quietly. Elena looked at him. "That isn't the same thing as getting to decide what happens to me." She left. Luca didn't follow. The next morning, He did something more difficult. He apologized. No flowers. No jewelry. No expensive gesture. He came to the garage alone. Elena was underneath a BMW when she saw polished black shoes stop beside the lift. She rolled out. Luca looked down at her. I was wrong. Elena sat up. What? I was wrong. Could you repeat that? The compressor was running. His mouth twitched. I won't decide where you go. She stood. But? No but. Elena studied him. What changed? You were right. That must have been painful. Extremely. She smiled. Luca continued. I can tell you the risk. I can offer protection. I can ask you to leave. But? He looked at her. You decide. Something warm moved through Elena's chest. Thank you. I would still prefer you leave Miami. And I would prefer you learn what a normal oil change costs. We're both disappointed. That was the moment Elena began falling for him. Not when he brought coffee. Not when he remembered how she took it. Not when the most feared man in the room listened while she explained machinery nobody else understood. It was when he changed. Because she asked him to. The final confrontation with Victor Hale did not happen in an abandoned warehouse. There were no dramatic kidnappings. No church. No army of gunmen. It happened at the annual Moretti Mobility Board presentation, inside a glass conference room overlooking the port of Miami. Victor expected Luca to accuse him. Instead, Luca let him present. Atlas Fleet Systems representatives sat beside Victor. Investors joined remotely. Lawyers filled the back wall. Elena sat at the table wearing a simple navy blazer she had bought the previous afternoon. She hated every second of it. Victor looked at her. The mechanic. Elena smiled politely. The executive. Victor continued his presentation. He argued that recent security failures proved Moretti's current vehicle infrastructure was compromised. He recommended immediate replacement. Atlas Fleet Systems, conveniently, could deliver. Luca listened without interruption. When Victor finished, he looked toward Elena. Monsieur Ramirez? Every face turned toward her. Victor smiled. With respect, Luca, we're discussing a 9-figure logistics infrastructure. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate forum for a mechanic? Elena asked. Victor's smile remained. For someone without corporate fleet management experience. Elena nodded. Fair. She stood. Her hands trembled slightly. She placed the modified Ferrari component on the table. Victor's smile vanished. This came from Mr. Moretti's Ferrari. She placed another component beside it. This came from a security Range Rover. Another. This came from a Mercedes used by Moretti mobility executives. Then she displayed magnified photographs. The alterations look unrelated, unless you understand how components wear after removal. Victor interrupted. This proves nothing. Correct. Elena changed slides. That's why I didn't stop there. She displayed serial numbers. Every component could be traced through distributors. Every distributor connected to Atlas. Victor leaned back. Atlas supplies thousands of components. Also correct. Another slide. But these parts weren't defective. She looked around the room. They were modified after distribution. Victor's lawyer whispered something. Elena continued. The Ferrari modification was designed to create a failure under sustained load. Not immediately. Not predictably enough to guarantee death. She looked at Victor. It was designed to create fear. Luca watched silently. Elena displayed the Atlas contract. The moment Mr. Moretti's security team believed the fleet had been compromised, replacing the fleet became rational. Another slide. Atlas's proposed vehicles included proprietary telematics, maintained through an Atlas-controlled service network. A board member leaned forward. What information would that provide? Routes, stops, maintenance schedules, driver patterns, possibly passenger patterns depending on configuration. Victor stood. This is speculation. Elena looked at him. No. She placed one final object on the table. A telematics module. We tested one. Silence. Victor's face drained. Elena had found the weakness because Victor had made one mistake. He assumed a mechanic understood engines. He did not understand that Elena understood systems. Machines were relationships between parts. One change affected another. A lie inside a machine created evidence somewhere else. So did a lie inside a company. Luca finally spoke. Sit down, Victor. Victor looked at him. For 17 years, he had apparently obeyed that voice. This time, he didn't. You think she understands what you've built? Luca's expression remained calm. No. Victor smiled bitterly. Exactly. She understands what you tried to destroy. The room became completely silent. Victor looked toward Elena. You think he respects you? Elena didn't answer. You're useful, Victor said. That's all. Men like Luca Moretti don't love people. They acquire them. Elena saw Luca's face change. Not because Victor had insulted him. Because the words touched something Luca feared might be true. Victor continued, when this is over, you'll either belong to him or become inconvenient. Luca stood. Enough. But Elena spoke first. No. Everyone looked at her. She faced Victor. You're wrong. Victor laughed. You've known him for what? 3 weeks? Long enough to tell him no. Victor's smile faded. And? Elena looked at Luca. He listened. Luca held her Gaza. That was the answer. The rest happened through lawyers, board votes, financial investigators, and Luca's own network. Victor Hale was removed from every Moretti company before sunset. Evidence of fraud, undisclosed ownership interests, manipulated procurement records, and corporate espionage was delivered to attorneys. Atlas lost the fleet contract. More importantly, Luca didn't destroy Victor in some theatrical act of revenge. He let evidence do what violence could not, make Victor powerless in daylight. 3 weeks later, Elena returned to ordinary work. At least she tried. Bellini performance had become unbearable. Customers requested her by name. Richard offered her a raise. Automotive magazines called. Someone leaked the story that a Miami mechanic had discovered sabotage involving a major transportation company, although Luca's name was mostly kept out of it. Elena turned down interviews. She wanted machines, not attention. Then, Luca disappeared. Not literally. He simply stopped inventing reasons to visit the garage. No questionable steering. No mysterious warning lights. No coffee. No dinner invitations disguised as business meetings. Elena told herself she appreciated the peace. By day 4, she hated it. On day 6, Marco arrived. Alone. He handed her an envelope. If this contains money, I'm throwing it at you. Marco smiled. I've wanted to see somebody do that to him for years. She opened it. Inside were corporate documents. Elena frowned. What is this? A company. Whose? Yours. If you want it. She stared at him. Moretti Precision Diagnostics, a proposed independent automotive diagnostic facility. No Moretti ownership. No hidden partnership. A building lease paid for 5 years. Equipment financing structured as a grant through one of Luca's legitimate business foundations. Full operational control assigned to Elena Ramirez. She looked at Marco. Where is he? Marina. Why didn't he bring this? Because he thinks you'll say no if he's standing there. He's right. Marco nodded. He knows. Elena found Luca at sunset. He stood alone beside the marina, looking across Biscayne Bay. No bodyguards visible. No black SUV beside him. Just Luca. She walked up holding the documents. You bought me a garage. He turned. No. You absolutely bought me a garage. I arranged financing for a diagnostic company. That's rich person language for buying me a garage. You can refuse. Elena stopped. There was no argument in his voice. No pressure. No expectation. You don't own any of it? No. Hidden company? No. Percentage? 0. Then why? Luca looked toward the water. Because you're better than the position you have. That isn't your decision. No. He looked at her again. It's my opinion. She waited. And because you helped me. So it's payment? No. What is it? His composure slipped slightly. An opportunity. For what? Whatever you choose. She looked down at the papers. If I take it, what do you get? Nothing. Luca. Nothing. And if I leave Miami? I'll make sure the financing transfers. If I never see you again? A pause. Yes. That answer hurt him. Elena could see it. And because she could see it, she finally understood what the documents actually represented. Not a garage. Not money. Choice. Luca had spent his entire life controlling outcomes. Now he was placing something valuable in her hands without controlling what she did with it. What do you want? Elena asked. His voice lowered. You? Her heart stopped for half a beat. Luca continued, before she could speak. But wanting you doesn't give me the right to keep you. The marina seemed impossibly quiet. Elena stepped closer. You're getting better at this. At what? Listening. I had a difficult teacher. She smiled. His eyes dropped briefly to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. He didn't touch her. Elena noticed. Of course she did. You're not going to kiss me? She asked. I don't know if you want me to. She stepped closer until barely an inch remained between them. You could ask. Something changed in Luca's face. The feared man who could stop meetings by entering rooms suddenly looked almost uncertain. Elena. Yes? Can I kiss you? She smiled. Yes. His hand rose slowly to her cheek. Even then, he waited. Elena closed the remaining distance. The kiss was quiet. No audience. No danger. No urgency. Weeks of restrained glances, arguments, interrupted moments, fear, respect, and everything neither of them had said finally became something simple. When they separated, Luca rested his forehead lightly against hers. You're still not getting ownership in my company, Elena whispered. I assumed, and you pay full price. Extortion. Business. He smiled. 6 months later, Ramirez Precision Diagnostics opened in Miami. Elena changed the name. Luca pretended not to be offended. She hired 2 young mechanics nobody else wanted to train, including a fuller-figured 19-year-old woman who had been told by 3 different garages that customers wouldn't take her seriously. Elena gave her a toolbox. Make them. Luca never interfered with the business. That may have been the greatest proof of change. He visited. Often. Sometimes with actual mechanical problems. Sometimes without them. But he always asked whether Elena had time. His world remained complicated, powerful, guarded. There were still parts of Luca's life Elena refused to romanticize. They argued about them, sometimes fiercely. He did not become a different man because he loved her, but he became a man willing to examine himself when she challenged him. And Elena never became impressed by the things that impressed everyone else. Not the hotels, not the penthouses, not the cars, especially not the cars. One Saturday afternoon, a familiar engine rolled into the diagnostic bay. Elena looked up from beneath the hood of a Corvette. The red Ferrari stopped inside. Luca stepped out. Elena folded her arms. No. He looked confused. I haven't said anything. You've got that look. What look? The expensive problem look. There may be a vibration. She stared at him. You said that 3 months ago. This is different. How? I noticed it at 70. Steering? Possibly. Braking? No. Acceleration? Maybe. Elena narrowed her eyes. Did you invent another mechanical problem because you wanted to see me? Luca considered his answer. Yes. She laughed. One of Elena's employees looked over. Luca walked around the Ferrari. He held out the keys. Months earlier, he would have said, "Inspect it." Now he placed the keys into Elena's grease-stained palm. Would you take a look? Elena looked down at the Ferrari key. Then at Luca Moretti. She remembered the first morning they met. The laughter. The men who thought she wanted a joyride. The manager who wanted her to move. The powerful stranger who assumed the diagnostic computer knew more than she did. The tiny hesitation nobody else heard. One moment beneath a Ferrari had changed both of their lives. Elena closed her fingers around the key. Only if you promise to listen this time. Luca smiled. I learned that lesson. She walked toward the driver's door. Good. He opened it for her. Elena stopped before getting inside. One more thing. What? If there's absolutely nothing wrong with this car, you're buying dinner. Agreed. Somewhere normal. Luca Sahil. That definition remains deeply unfair. Elena Grint. Get in, Moretti. He walked around to the passenger side. Not the driver's seat. The passenger seat. Elena started the Ferrari. The engine settled into a perfect idle. She listened. Luca watched her. What? Elena tilted her head. There it was. A faint vibration. Tiny. Almost invisible. Her smile slowly disappeared. Luca noticed. There really is something wrong? Elena glanced at him. Maybe. His eyebrows rose. Should I be worried? 6 months earlier, he would have demanded an answer. Now he waited. Elena smiled and shifted into drive. Let's find out. The Ferrari rolled into the Miami sunlight. Elena behind the wheel and Luca beside her, finally comfortable enough to let someone else choose the road.